was a busy week between the British and French Grand Prix, and not just for the teams. The Queen's July went from bad to worse as her bodyguard Michael Trestrail was forced to resign, not over the Michael Fagan incident, but over his relationship with a male sex worker. And a day later, provisional IRA bombs exploded in Hyde Park and Regent's Park. The former, packed with nails, killed 4 soldiers and 7 horses of the household cavalry, as well as injuring other soldiers and passers-by. The latter killed 7 members of the Band of the Royal Green Jackets while performing a lunchtime concert. One of the surviving injured horses, Sefton, became something of a minor celebrity, with accounts of his record 8-hour surgery prompting over £600,000 in donations to set up a new surgical wing at the Royal Veterinary College. There was at least one bright spot for the British establishment as HMS Hermes returned victorious from the Falklands to Portsmouth and a hero's welcome. On the 23rd of July, the International Whaling Commission decided that commercial whaling would be made illegal, giving a timeline of 1985-6 for the final abolition, while in the US, a horrific helicopter accident on the set of Twilight Zone the movie killed actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors Micah Dinlay and Renee Shin-Yi Chen. Investigations found that director John Landis had not only repeatedly ignored safety warnings about the stunt involving a helicopter hovering low over the 3 actors while explosions went off around it, but that the 2 child actors were being paid under the table to circumvent child labour laws and hidden from health and safety welfare officers to allow them to participate in the late-night shoot. The resulting court proceedings dragged on for years, but resulted in a much stronger safety culture in Hollywood. The Grand Prix teams meanwhile headed south, through France, to the Circuit Paul Ricard at Le Castellet, near Marseille on the Côte d'Azur. There was one change to the driver lineup. Nigel Mansell had tried to come back too early and aggravated his injury, so Colin Chapman needed a new driver. Rather than throw Paul Moreno in at the deep end again, he signed up Jeff Lees, who had ably jumped in at Theodore. Meanwhile, all eyes were on Tolman after Warwick's heroics at Brands Hatch. So out of the blue was it that there were dark rumours that it was some kind of trick, running a car on a light and fuel load to grab TV coverage and attract sponsors, in the full knowledge it had run out before the end. We would see. There was an air of nervousness about the Renault team. Their underwhelming performances so far this season had led to persistent rumours that corporate bosses back in Paris had already cut back on development funding and were contemplating pulling the plug altogether, while both Arnoux and Prost were said to be reconsidering their futures with the team. Prost to Williams, Arnoux to Ferrari was the current scuttlebutt. If Ferrari were nervous, the other French team, Ligier, were in a complete shambles. Whatever internal politics were going on had resulted in the decision to now abandon the JS17 and persist with the JS19, despite there being still no sign of the promised Matra turbo that it had been designed for. Still, both Renault with their turbo engines and Ligier with their big V12s had the ingredients to do well at Paul Ricard, which could have been built with them in mind. An epically long straight, over a mile long, meant that top-line speed was paramount, though there were some sharp corners in the infield section that required a judicious setup, particularly for the non-turbos, to get every last advantage. Even the weather conditions seemed to favour the turbo cars, with glorious sunshine tempered by a light breeze to help cool the hard-working engines, and the hard-working mechanics who set up for practice in Le Castellet a mere 4 days after leaving Kent. Whatever had ailed the Renaults at Brands was fixed now, and the 2 Renaults were easily the class of the field in qualifying, with Pironi third, over a second behind Prost. Patrese lined up 4th, then Tombe and Piquet, all turbos so far, then De Cesaris and Giacomelli, with the Alfa Romeo team scratching their head as to how they'd managed that, then the top Cosworth runners, the McLarens and Williamses. Warwick was a satisfied 14th, though Fabi could only manage 21st. The Ligiers were a disgruntled 16th and 19th. Jeff Lees put his Lotus on 24th after having only sat in the car once, and Jochen Mass squeaked his march onto the back of the grid, leaving Lammers, Guerrero and the 2 Brazilians, Serra and Bozell, as Sunday spectators. Such was the power difference that the gap between Arnoux and Mass was some 7.2 seconds. Brabham had their fueling gear with them again, so once more the pit lane swirled with rumours about their strategy as the team set up on race day. It was said that at Brands the plan had been for Patrese to run light and do a stop, and for Piquet to start on full tanks and run to the end, but since neither had made it beyond lap 10, we'd still have to wait and see. A good crowd was out to enjoy the sun and hope for success for one of the 4 French drivers in the top teams. The start was clean enough, except for Jarier, left on the grid with an instant broken driveshaft. Arnoux led Prost, with Pironi, Piquet, Patrese and Tombe in tow. The the two Brabhams jostling for position, while all six began to immediately pull out a lead over the non-turbo cars led by Daly's Williams. By the end of lap 1, Patrese had got up to third and was tucked in behind Prost and got ahead along the main straight. A lap later he did the same to Arnoux at the same place to take the lead, while Piquet had made his way up past Pironi and Prost, so it was Brabham, Renault, Ferrari. Soon enough, Piquet was past Arnoux too to make it nicely even. Patrese already had quite a lead, and it looked like he at least was probably running light and making a stop. Meanwhile, Daly was already some distance behind in a lonely 7th place, and the various non-turbo runners were pacing themselves and hoping that the turbos would expire on their own. Then, on lap 8, Patrese slowed and started emitting smoke. The smoke was quickly joined by flames. Apparently, unaware of this, Ricciardo turned in and hopped out, by which time his fiberglass engine cover was well and truly alight. Piquet took over the lead, while the unlucky Jeff Lees trailed in to have a punctured tyre replaced. Behind Daly, still ploughing a lonely furrow but now in 6th and Lauda in 7th, was an entertaining 5-way scrap between Giacomelli, Watson, Rosberg, De Cesaris and Alboreto, which saw Rosberg make his way to the front of the group. Then, on lap 13, Mauro Baldi and Jochen Mass, running at the back, tangled going into the fast right-hander at the end of the Mistral straight. Baldi ended up in the tyre wall, relatively unscathed, but Mass's car had been catapulted over the catch fencing and the tyre barrier and landed in the crowd, where it promptly caught fire. Miraculously, although half a dozen spectators needed hospital treatment for cuts and bruises, and Jochen himself had burnt hands, there were no serious injuries, but it could have been another catastrophe to add to this year's already too high tally. Daly came in with a puncture promoting Lauda into the points, and John Watson came in to retire with an electrical fault, just as Lauda decided to stop for tyres as he had Rosberg bearing down on him. Thinking quickly, the Austrian went straight through the pit lane and tried again next time. He'd dropped back to 12th though, and Rosberg gratefully inherited 6th and the best of the rest mantle. The race had pretty much settled into a processional affair by 1/3 distance, with the only questions being whether Piquet was making a mid-race stop and if he'd have enough of a lead when he did, and which of the remaining turbos would break down. On lap 24, Piquet did just that, his engine expiring as he came to lap Daly on the Mistral straight. He got a pillion ride back to the pits on a Marshall's dirt bike, which put Arnoux back in the lead with Prost 2nd, Pironi and Tambay 3rd and 4th. 4 French drivers at the head of the race, the top 2 driving all French cars. And that was it for racing. The Renaults proved reliable for once, and the top 6 at the halfway point were the same as the top 6 at the end. The only real point of interest was that Arnoux was ordered to give way to Prost, who still had an outside shot at the title. However, Prost had fallen some 20 seconds behind with slight handling problems, and Arnoux didn't seem inclined to slow that much, so he simply ignored team orders and led Prost home for the win. Unlike Reutemann and Jones and Pironi and Villeneuve before them, however, there didn't seem to be any animosity on the podium. Presumably the pair were just happy to have finally made good on such a vital weekend for the team, and Prost probably couldn't honestly begrudge Arnoux the win after the torrid season and a half he'd had up to this point. The local fans were of course delighted, and French enthusiasm for motorsport had seldom been higher. They were looking forward to the Swiss Grand Prix at Dijon in a couple of months' time, a venue that had also seen a great Renault victory in 1981. In 2 weeks' time, however, the teams would head to Hockenheim. Pironi now led the title standings after having occupied all 3 podium spots in the last 3 races, while Watson hadn't scored in any of them.